Coming up on UGTV, Board of Commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Good evening. We'll now call the meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call, Ramirez. Johnson. Kane. Markley. Walters. Philbrook. Bynum.
Here.
Burrows. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. Good evening. Thank you all for being here this evening. Our invocation is being given by Reverend Jared Altick of Wyandotte Christian Church. Please stand, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please bow your heads in prayer. Our Lord God and Father in heaven, we give you praise for blessing us with every spiritual blessing in Christ. You give us life, and our successes come from you, so we give you all the credit, glory, and honor. Tonight we pray for the peace and prosperity of our city, as you commanded your people through the prophet Jeremiah. We know that as we meet in these chambers, elsewhere in our community, there are violent people planning to act on the evil in their hearts. Father God, we ask tonight that you stay their hand and you give shelter to the innocent. We know that neighbors and partners plan to cheat and lie to one another, so we ask that your Holy Spirit would sway them to walk in truth and honesty. And finally, Lord, we know that divisions exist among us here, dividing us by race, class, and politics. We ask that the love of Jesus Christ would unite us as we work together for a better Wyandotte County. Lord God, be a shield of protection for our police officers and first responders, and give your blessing to this meeting tonight. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Reverend Altick. I'd ask the clerk, are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
There are no revisions.
Thank you. All right, tonight we have two distinct parts to our meeting. The planning and zoning portion is handled first, followed by the regular commission meeting. I'll ask the clerk to read the statement required by state law governing the planning zoning portion of our meeting, followed by the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor David Alvey, Commissioner Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1, Commissioner Tom Burrows, at-large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, Commissioner Christian Ramirez, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnson Jr., District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, and Commissioner Jane Philbrook, District 8. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express your views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has 3 options. Number 1, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission's with 6 votes. Number 2, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. And number 3, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration, together with the statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the Planning and Zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote of recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the Planning Commission's recommendation on all items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we would appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any item on the Planning and Zoning agenda. I will ask if any member of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponents or opponents on any item on the agenda.
Yes, do any of the commissioners have any disclosures to make? Commissioner Ramirez?
Actually, that's my button. It's probably mislabeled on your box.
Yes, it is. Shame, shame, shame.
So we've had a little bit of a turnover here, and we're going to get things relabeled properly in a moment, because I switched seats when we had a little bit of a changeover. And so my button was actually the one that was blinking on your box. So if I could, I'll just run through my contacts. I've had contact with interested parties for SP 2019-70. I've had contact with proponents and opponents of S 2023-3 and S 2020-4. I've had contact with proponents and opponents of SP 2019-80 and SP 2019-81.
Okay, Commissioner Bynum.
I have had contact with the change of zone, under A, change of zone applications, item 23213.
I'm assuming Commissioner Johnson? No. Commissioner Philbrook.
Commissioner
This is going to be
Johnson,
fun.
you said here.
This is going to be fun. Oh, boy.
This is a guess. Okay, so yeah, I have several to report.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. A change of zoning, number 3213, proponents and opponents to that. SP 2019-108, opponents. SP 2026, proponents. SP 2020-10, proponents. And MP 2020-1, proponents and opponents.
Thank you. That's it?
I'll read the items on the consent agenda. Change of zone applications, item number 13212, Anisha M. Evans Rourke. Change of zone from R1B Single District to R2B, two-family district for a duplex at 2815 North 20th Street, recommended for approval. Item 3213, Nathaniel Hagendorn with North Point Development. Change of zone from R1 Single Family, RPM Planned Mobile Home Park, RP5 Planned Apartment, and CP2 Planned General Business Districts to MP2 Planned General Industrial District for a logistics park for warehousing, distribution, and light manufacturing business at 747 North 69th Street, recommended for approval. Special use permit applications, item 1, SP 2019-70, Ronald Grosenhuzi with Hickory Union Moto. Special use permit for a community motorcycle garage for do-it-yourself repair and storage on your own motorcycle at 10 South James Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 2, SP 2019-98, Furkik Saidib with Frank Motors, Inc., special use permit for automotive sales and auto repair at 402 and 406 Osage Avenue, recommended for approval for 1 year. Item 3, SP 2019-108, Sheffer Stevenson, special use permit for the temporary use of land to park work trucks and store work equipment at 3420 North 67th Street, recommended for denial. Item 4, SP 2019-110, Adrian Norton with Busy Dogs, special use permit for a dog grooming and boarding operation at 1046 Merriam Lane, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 5, SP 2019-119, Ladina Washington with Ultra Support, Inc., special use permit for a child daycare facility for a church at 9151 Parallel Parkway, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 6, SP 2020-1, Clifford Dale Jr. with 4104 Powell Avenue, LLC, special use permit for live entertainment with conjunction with Mason Jar Restaurant at 941 North 74th Drive, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 7, SP 2022-2, John Dennison, special use permit for a short-term rental Airbnb at 4447 Booth Street, recommended for approval for 1 year. Item 8, SP 2020-4, Joe Hydrick with Cactus Bed Properties, renewal of a special use permit for a short-term rental Airbnb at 4313 Rainbow Boulevard, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 9, SP 2020-6, Stephanie Worth with KBC Kansas, is a renewal of a special use permit for short-term youth foster care at 316 through 334 North 38th Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 10, SP 2020-7, Frederick Avery with Avery's Village, renewal of a special use permit for a youth residential facility at 6261 Leavenworth Road, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 11, SP 2020-8, Ann and Roy Baugh, renewal of a home occupation special use permit for a short-term rental Airbnb at 1615 North 86th Street, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 12, SP 2020-9, Alma Mendoza, renewal of a special use permit for an auto detailing and used car sales at 741 Washington Boulevard, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 13, SP 2020-10, Ruby Martin with Hilltop Saddle Club, renewal of a special use permit for a trailer to hold monthly meetings and storage of supplies for Horse Riding Club at 5025 Muncie Drive, recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 14, SP 2020-11, D. Scott Cummins with Tire and Wheel, which is a renewal for special use permit for tire sales and light mechanical auto work at 3748 State Avenue, recommended for approval for 5 years. Vacation applications, items 1 through 6, will be UE 2019-7 through 2019-12, which are vacating utilities for the following easement addressments. 3640 North 110th, recommended for approval. 3638 North 110th Terrace, recommended for approval. 3636 North 110th Terrace, recommended for approval. 3630 North 110th Terrace, recommended for approval. Item number 5 is 3624 North 10th Terrace, recommended for approval. And the final item for Torrey Graham with GTS Homes is 3618 North 110th Terrace, recommended for approvals. Items 7 and 8, UE 2020-1 through UE 2020-2 for Melissa Van Crom for Dean Realty Company, vacation of utility easements for the following 2 addresses. 10 East Cambridge Circle is recommended for approval, and 1155 Adams Street is recommended for approval. Items 9 and 10, S 2020-3 through S 2020-4, Michael Davis with Reese and Nichols Roberts, vacation of street between North Tremont to 7th Street is recommended for approval, and between 7th Street trafficway to Simpson Avenue is recommended for approval. Plan review application, we have 1 item, PR 2020-1, Ted McEnany with Asphalt Sales Company, preliminary and final plan review for an asphalt manufacturing facility at 2751 South 88th Street, recommended for approval. Master plan amendments, item number 1, MP 2020-1, Nathaniel Hagedorn with North Point Development, is a master plan amendment from low-density residential and mixed-use to industrial at 747 North 69th Street, recommended for approval. Miscellaneous items. Item number 1 in this orders and rezoning property at 4401 North 115th Street from RP1 Planned Single Family District to R1 Single Family District is recommended for approval. Item 2 is an ordinance rezoning property at 3301 Garfield Avenue from R1B Single Family District to R2B Two Family District, recommended for approval. Item 3 is an ordinance vacating utility easement at 2600 by State Drive, and that is recommended for approval. Those are all items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. All right. Does any member of the commission, county administrator, or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by 1 vote to follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission. If a member of the public would like to step forward to ask for an item to be set aside, please come to the podium, state your name, and give us the number of the petition. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm Jason Faust, Kansas City, Kansas. I'd like to request that change of zone 3213 and Master Plan Amendment 2020-1 be set aside.
I'm sorry, 3213?
And Master Plan Amendment 2020-1.
2020-1. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, Richard Palmerin, 639 Simpson. I'd like to set aside number S 2020-4, number 10.
Special use permit,
Yes, C10, that's item C10.
C10.
Thank you.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez. Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to set aside item 3213. And is that connected, Rob, with, obviously, with MP 2020-1?
Yes,
So we'll
you should hear both of those together.
Consider those together. Thank you. I was going to do that at the beginning of the non-consent agenda. Okay, proceed.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, this item comes to you recommended for approval from the Planning Commission. This is for the Turner Logistics Park. Of note there are some residential areas around here, around this proposal, and the recommendation comes to you recommending a berm and screening such that the residential uses wouldn't be able to see the industrial uses adjacent to them. There was one person in opposition at Planning Commission meeting. He's here this evening, and I believe the applicant is here ready to do a presentation if you'd like.
Yes, thank you. Let's hear the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Brent Miles on North Point Development. I will make this a little abbreviated. I think people probably generally understand the context here. This is the Turner Logistics Center. This has been in the making for about 3 years as we've continued to apply as a partnership with KTA and KDOT for funding for the new interchange. That funding was approved. In my opinion, a major factor in that funding was participation financially from our organization, participation from the unified government, and a taxing stream to pay the unified government's portion of the new interchange. We have a development agreement that's been approved and in place with you all. We did not do zoning simultaneously. This got brought up in the Planning Commission. Well, if you've been planning it so long, why didn't you do zoning? We have been in the process, and I think we've acquired to date about 30 total properties, and we have another 12 or so out under contract, and maybe another 5 or so in negotiation. So we've had a kind of a mass flood of people coming to us saying, I'd like you to buy my house, I'd like you to buy my lot, I'd like you to buy my land. We made a decision at a cutoff that we needed to start our first buildings. Therefore, we needed to start on the rezoning, and we made a rezoning application for what we had under control at that time, which is a pretty big bulk land-wise of the project. Many of you know, I call it, for lack of a better term, the spaghetti. The spaghetti will be taken out. That is the Turner Diagonal College Parkway interchange now, and obviously construction groundbreaking tomorrow on the new interchange, which will provide access to these properties that we've been purchasing that had not been able to be accessed before because of the configuration and engineering, for lack of a better term, again, of the spaghetti bowl. Many of you know the Amazon project was the preemptus to this whole thing, the Riverview interchange and intersection that happened, and then funding, application, and grant for the interchange itself on I-70, and then here is the overlay of the east side of the project. We did not come through zoning yet on the west side of the project, primarily because we didn't want to have to go through the process and have you go through this several times. We wanted to come in with one application on the west, again, just because we've seen so many people agree to terms over the last 60 to 90 days. And so we focused on the east. That's the first phase of our project, to build our buildings on the east. As Rob said, and as the applicant will say, or as the resident will say, we are obviously adjacent to residential properties. We've been buying a big multitude of those residential properties. I think, as Rob also said, we are required to put berm and screening in place, which we've agreed to do. Again, this is a light industrial project. Many of you are familiar with the projects that we've done in the past in the community. We've done the redevelopment of the public levy down in Fairfax. This building will look very, very similar. If you look at that building and you look at the uses inside, we have everything from a Wells Fargo vault, essentially, on one end, to electrical supply company on the other. We have GM's tires. So we have about 5 tenants in that building. We don't really have any outdoor storage. We don't have a ton of truck traffic. If you've been down through the Fairfax district, we're not the generator of truck traffic by any means. And I think architecturally done really well. So for those of you familiar with that project, that would be a very similar size and scale to what you see for these buildings here. So we're excited. We're hopeful that this rezoning gets done tonight, and obviously get started on the project and start construction. Just for way of background, we would look to complete our first building still this calendar year, which is in line with the development agreement that we have. And we're so bullish on this park that we are probably going to start 2 buildings at the same time on this east side, just because of the momentum that we have right now in the market and the access and labor, the Truce line, or the Max line that comes down College Parkway, and rapid transit, the amenities along State Avenue, and our connection with the community college. We're just super excited to get this project. It's been a long time in the making, and I jokingly say almost congratulations. We're almost to the starting line, and I think it's going to be a really big success and people can be proud of. Mayor, I'll answer any questions, commissioners. I'll answer any questions that you may have. Or if the person would like to bring up points, I'd be happy to come back up to the podium at your discretion.
Thank you. So is there anyone present? I'll open the public hearing. Who would like to speak in favor of 3213 or MP 2020-1? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone present in opposition who would like to speak on this item? Please come forward and state your comments. And restate your name and address, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I'm Jason Faust, Kansas City, Kansas, live at 829 North 69th Street. I am the person referred to previously as the one who will be speaking in opposition. I thank Mr. Miles for his comments. There were a few items of correction. First, the City Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals application for a berm and screening was denied, and so they were ordered to, or required to return to the Planning and Zoning Department to revise that plan for additional screening to meet or exceed the ordinances as required and as precedented by their development at the Amazon location directly south of this proposed location. That being said, the 2 points of opposition that we have in regards to this is there have been a few items that Mr. Miles presented that are newer in the last 3 weeks than that was presented at the City Planning Commission. In addition to the screening element, the number of properties that have either been purchased, contracted, or in negotiation has increased slightly, but until all the residential properties in that area have been acquired and zone changed away from R1, RP5, or RM, they will still have the incompatibility issue with a MP2 zoning district. At the City Planning Commission, the applicant did not successfully or satisfactorily explain why they were asking for MP2 zoning instead of MP1 zoning as exemplified by the Amazon location directly to the south. Apart from the Amazon location, there is no industrial zoned area anywhere nearby this property. This is a total proposition of speculative investment and construction that while they have placed a very rosy description upon it and are leaning on a lot of positive possible outcomes, there are no assurances or guarantees that any of those outcomes will take place. Thus, the master plan amendment changing the area from designated as residential low-density use, which has stood for decades.
You have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you. They have not met the satisfactory burden listed in 27-211 of the 12 items that are required to be considered. They do not presented the proof, to my knowledge, or in any of the plan or staff reports, that they have met enough of those conditions to warrant a master plan amendment change up to such a degree up to industrial use. And the same argument would be made towards the change of zone, as it is a very significant impact on the neighborhood, and that the only saving grace for them is that they're purchasing all the residential neighborhood around them. That's not really a warranted argument for justifying the change of zone without fully satisfactorily explaining quite a lot more detail, especially there's a distinct difference between MP1 and MP2, and why do they want MP2? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Rob, would you want to address some of the concerns that were raised by the opponent?
So I think that the point he's making about incompatibility is addressed by the fact that we're saying you have to screen this from the residentials. And we have precedent from the governing body of saying that that is an acceptable way to make those uses compatible, to make it so you can't see them. And so that's what we've done, and I think that really addresses the compatibility issue. And, you know, if they were to acquire all the residential, then they could do a normal screen between whatever the uses are adjacent following the acquisition of the residential. And that might include, they might have to come back and do some more area here, because all the things that all the properties that Brent talked about being in negotiation are not included in this application. So they will have to come back at some future point if they acquire more property and work on that part of their plan and the zoning and the master plan, all that again. The master plan is a policy level document. And so I think if, this is a very large area, it's not like you're taking a quarter-acre lot and zoning it industrial in the middle of a subdivision. This is a very, very large area adjacent to an interstate highway where we're making interstate improvements to accommodate more industrial traffic, and we are taking all of the measures necessary to protect the adjacent residential properties from whatever nuisance might be created by having a industrial park next to you. And so I think that they have met the burden of, and if you have the staff report, we have gone through all the factors to be considered related to the master plan and the zoning and have found that they meet those. The Planning Commission agreed with the staff's recommendation on that, and it comes to you recommended for approval. Mr. Mayor, when you do move forward for action on this, I think we should take the master plan first and then the change of zone.
Thank you. Does the petitioner have any additional comments? So, the Commission, any questions or concerns? Commissioner.
So I've been involved with this activity since almost now 2014 when we all started talking about expanding into other areas because we were running out of light industry and that sort of thing, and started working on this interchange. So this isn't something that has just come up recently. This has been a long-term working thing. And when we finally got the monies from the federal government and then the state government, that allowed us to move into this intersection change. And that is what's allowing us to do all this work. I want to thank everybody that has been working very hard on this because this has been very complicated from the federal, state to us. And so I want to thank everybody that's been working on this. Thank you.
All right, seeing that there are no more comments or questions from the Commission, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Just for clarification, is this just a
Oh,
vote?
yes,
on
I'm sorry, thank you.
Just on
This is
E2?
3213 first.
Yes.
E1, I'm sorry. Okay.
Do the master plan first?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm
So I
sorry.
move to accept the master plan part.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
All right, that takes us to 3213.
Move to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson. Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to set aside item C10, 2020-4 vacation application.
So,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, this is, when you get it up on the map here, this is a portion of 6th Street Traffic Way where it intersects with 7th Street. And there was a little bit of discussion at Planning Commission from a neighbor to the south about on-street parking and about rear access to their property. The way their property is currently situated, this application doesn't impact the rear of their property because that's all owned by another party that we don't have contact with. And as you can see, actually, Byron, if you'll hand me the mouse there. This is the home of the person that spoke at Planning Commission, and they're worried about parking the cars here and on-street parking since they don't have access to the rear of their house through this piece. And eventually, there'll be a curb line across here where they could continue to park. Once the street is closed off, they'd still be able to park there proximate to their home. 6th Street right here, if it were to be vacated, half of it would go to the commercial business here, and half of it would go to the applicant on this side. As I said, it comes to you recommended for approval by the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. So you are the petitioner?
G'day, Will Anderson, BHC Road, 7112 State Avenue, Kansas City, Kansas. We've actually got, there's two parts to it. We're also vacating Calvin Street from Tremont across. And we're also applying for the piece to close out 6th Street Trafficway. Calvin Street, all that area in there has been demolished, now the buildings and everything like that. The owner owns everything that effectively adjoins it, would have the right apart from the tyre business, as Rob said. The UG has indicated an interest to also close off 6th Street Trafficway at 7th Street there as well to improve the flow. So that's effectively what we're doing. Open to questions.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in support of these vacations? Seeing none, is there anyone in opposition? Please come forward. State your name and city of residency, please.
Richard Palmerin, 639 Simpson. I'm the property that's circled with the stockade fence. I'm having some issues probably with the previous where I'd maintain the property for the to keep it appearance for the pedestrian traffic on 6th Street cutoff. The building at 7th and Simpson, it's a tire shop. I've yet to talk to them. I've talked to 2 of the residents in the neighborhood, you know, on being up here this evening. You know, I've done some sweat equity on the front of these while the structures were still there to keep them down for the John Q. public to walk through there safely. I did your 7 years ago, I did the sidewalk with intent that letting the city know that I'm going to be putting replacing the crumple down, everything east and west of me, or northeast and southwest of me. But there's a 100-year-old sewer down there, and whatever else is buried underneath there. And with this development that eventually is going to come through here, what's this going to do to start interrupting my peace of mind of 40 years that I've been in there, and it's been in my wife's family for an additional 40. So, I mean, you'll see me now and you'll see me later, but I'll be a stickler once we start getting some berms, some public interest, getting some more people involved.
1 minute, sir.
Not with the public meeting up here at the library where Catholic Housing was there. Another party from the neighborhood speaking on his parents' behalf, but I've knocked on some doors around. I need to get the thing out in Spanish and maybe move it to their competitor, which is Bethel Neighborhood Center, that they've done some improvements, and I'm sure they'd open up an area to where the membership can, or the taxpayer can come in and see what's going on with this master plan. I'm yet to find out what this master plan is for what this development that's I think he gets a tenant finish type occupancy license, because I've never seen a building permit, but maybe those are things of the past. But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else present like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I will close the public comment. Any members of the commission have questions or comments? Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent. We're making some contacts right there. Mr. Palmerin, first of all, I want to thank you for the work that you've done in the past on that block and in that neighborhood. To keep it up, it's very much appreciated. We know that there have been some challenges with many of those properties there. It seems as if we're talking about two separate but related issues here. First is the issue of vacation of the North 6th Street trafficway, and second is the issue of the potential for a future development on that site. And I want to make sure we keep those separate, because the only thing that we're considering here tonight is the vacation of the 6th Street trafficway. And so as we look at that, I have my own map that I've color-coded so I can keep all the parcels separate in my head. But I think because when we vacate 6th Street, there will be a curb that will continue effectively from the corner by where your parcel is, right there where the hand is, and it'll continue on across. There will certainly be opportunity for everyone who parks there now to continue to park. So anybody who's on the North 6th Street traffic will still have access to it. I've talked with, and I saw our county engineer was here a moment ago, and we have had several discussions, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a continuing concern that where Calvin and North 6th Street trafficway both dump into 7th Street, that because it is so close to the intersection, there could be some safety concerns, and have been some safety concerns with cars entering 7th Street trafficway from those two streets before, and that vacating this and moving everybody up to Simpson would give us a little bit more of a break between cars that are turning onto 7th Street and the 7th and Central intersection. So it might end up making it a little bit safer over there. So now, having said that, I do favor the vacation of North 6th Street trafficway because of the reasons that were presented in terms of both safety and the potential for a future development. But speaking about the future development, that'll be a separate thing. But we collectively have to make sure that the developer, whenever that occurs, follows all applicable laws and is a good neighbor above all things, is a good neighbor to all of us. So that's going to be on us when that eventually comes back, and I have no idea what it's going to look like or when it's even going to come, but when it does, we need to make sure that it is a development that complements the community and treats everybody around it as a good neighbor. So that's what I would say, and with that, I would move that we approve the decision of the Planning Commission to vacate North 6th Street trafficway.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson. Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. We're going to move to the Planning and Zoning non-consent agenda, but before we do, I just want to recognize a dignitary in our presence, Mr. Chuck Stites from Edwardsville City Council. I'm sorry I missed that at the beginning. I hope I didn't miss anybody else, but thank you for being here. All right, we have 3 items on the Planning and Zoning non-consent agenda. Item number 1 is special use permit application SP-2019-80, Alexander Refsholt with AREP and Anderson LLC for a short-term rental / Airbnb at 338 North 14th Street. The Planning Commission voted 4-2 for denial. I'll ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This home is right on the corner and overlooks the playground of the church there in the neighborhood. And that was the focus of the neighborhood opposition to this. Having folks coming in and out on a regular basis, it's different than a long-term renter in that they would not have to change their sex offender registration just to be at an Airbnb, but if they were going to live there long-term, they would have to. And so the folks in the neighborhood were concerned about the children being right there and having somebody being able to look out the window over the playground without having any background check. They were also concerned with how the applicant had conducted themselves in the past because they'd operated without a permit for a little bit. I think the applicant is here and would probably like to make a presentation.
Thank you. I'd ask the applicant to come forward to present his application. Then please come forward. Thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, so my name is Eric Anderson. I am at 334 North 14th Street, the next permit that you're going to talk about. So with Alex, there was some reservations that had been made, and when we realized that we needed to have this permit process completely finished, and there had been technical issues preventing it from successfully being live with 30-day plus bookings. The listing was then taken down until I think from October until now. One of the issues that came up was that the reservations that had already been made were not canceled. As a host, you get some pretty harsh penalties when you cancel reservations that had already been made. So that was one of the issues that had come up. No further bookings had been taken since October, that October meeting, but that was what had occurred.
Okay, thank you. I open the public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of special use permit, SP 2019-80? If so, please step to the podium at this time and give us your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Erin Hurd. I live at 338 North 14th Street, the house in question in front of what would actually be the short-term rental, because it's actually just the garage apartment behind the house that would be the short-term rental, not the house itself technically. Not much to say. It was the same thing that Eric said, but now we are fully compliant, and that we do have a stay in there right now, but it is over a 30-day stay, so we're fully in compliant. And if all the listings that we currently have up are now, they say they have to be 30 days plus, and if an error occurs where someone does try and book less than 30 days, then we just cancel it, so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else present who'd like to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition? All right, commissioners, Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies to everybody in this room. You're going to get tired of hearing from me tonight. So first of all, we've had this discussion about Airbnbs before, that there are many pros and there are many cons to Airbnbs, and no city in the United States is immune from controversy about them, nor has anybody come to a common decision on how to best manage them. In this case, my one big concern about all of this is that I sat with the two of you back at the 1st of October, and you both looked me in the eye and you both said, no, you didn't have any bookings. You weren't going to have any guests. And I understand that you both did still have, but after you were contacted by Mr. Richardson, you didn't have any more, but there were still some at 338. That is, to me, that is not acceptable that you look at me and say, yeah, when the answer is no. And that you're not upfront and truthful with me, because I think we probably could have worked through it at that point. But at this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richardson, if the applicant at 338 were to decide to apply for a special use permit again in the future with a new application, would that be accepted?
If it's denied this evening, they would have to wait for a year.
Have to wait for a year. Based on what I have just said, I move that we uphold the decision of the Planning Commission to deny the special use permit.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley,
Aye.
Walters, Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have item number 2, special use permit application SP-2019-81, Eric Frank Anderson with KC Viking Realty Incorporated for a short-term rental / Airbnb at 334 North 14th Street. The Planning Commission voted 5-1 for approval for 6 months. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this house is just 2 doors down. While we had some of the same issues with this property related to operating without a permit and continuing to operate without a permit after they were told not to do that, at the end of the neighborhood, since this house, you can't see the playground from this house, the neighborhood said that they essentially didn't really have an objection to this one. And so it comes to you with a split vote recommending in favor of approving this particular property.
Thank you. I'd ask the applicant to come forward to present the application. Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Hello again. This is Eric Anderson, 334 North 14th Street. Let's see. So I do recognize fully that there mistakes were made in the process of applying for this permit and for operating for a period of time with accepting bookings when we shouldn't have. I will say I made some bonehead mistakes. I thought that it was okay to operate while during the application process. When the conversation happened in October that needed to stop any and all bookings and reservations and so forth. They had to, if there was to be anything, it would be 30-day plus, so that way it'd still be on the long-term rental permits that we had. I did. I had no more reservations. I know we already talked about 338. From there, at least for my house, I've not had any other issues, and I've been following recommendations. And at the end of last meeting, there it was looked like the agreement was to give me a 6-month trial run and see how well I can follow the rules. I'm listening. I'm going to do my best to follow the letter of the rule that you guys put down tonight, whichever way you go. I'm going to make sure to check in with him and really double check and follow what I'm told.
Thank you. Anyone present who would like to open the public hearing? Anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Seeing none. Anyone present like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and entertain questions and comments from the commission. Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Anderson, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I have known that you have been in our neighborhood now. Your situation is different than 338. You have been in the neighborhood for a period of, I believe, 3 years now?
Yeah, come March, 3 years.
Okay, so 3 years offering long-term rentals instead of short-term rentals, and you have been a good neighbor to the best of my observation in those 3 years. There haven't been any issues with tenants of your building. There haven't been any issues with code violations on the exterior of your building. There haven't been any issues, and you have demonstrated to me, at least, that you're a responsible property manager and property owner with respect to your property. And so with that, I would move that we approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the special use permit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 3 is special use permit application SP-2019-97, Damon Downs with Downs Trucking Company to park 2 heavy dump trucks on vacant residential property overnight at 4510 Parkview Avenue. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 for denial. I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the request to park the heavy equipment, the dump trucks in this area, requires them to drive through residential areas on streets that aren't the greatest in all cases. It's really not, staff's view, appropriate place to for that kind of activity, and there are other places in the community where they could park those. The Planning Commission has recommended denial 6-1.
Thank you. I'd ask the applicant to come forward to present the application. And please state your name and city of residency, please.
Yeah, Damon Downs. Residency is 5348 Haskell, Kansas City, Kansas.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm really petitioning. I didn't really know exactly. It's just I own that property, and I kind of told them whatever the city asked me to do on that. It is a residential, but I presented to them that it is, there is a neighborhood. I'm trying to think of what type of neighborhood that is. But I'm on a dead-end street down there off of Leavenworth Road, and so I stay on the backside of the Horseshoe residence. And so if they say it's not a liable place for trucks, I'm okay with that. I'll find somewhere else to park them. But if they say it's okay, I have, the city owns about 9 acres and 8 acres behind me on a dead-end street there, so just where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in support of this application? No? Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. You can sit down, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and now, commissioners, yes, you can go ahead. We do have these marked correctly. Temporary, but they work. Commissioner Townsend, right? Did you want to? That's okay. Okay, Commissioner Townsend, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Downs, can you come back to the podium? I just have one quick question, or maybe two. I'm curious, it wasn't in our materials. What is the purpose of your trucks? What do you do with these trucks?
All asphalt for Fahey Asphalt.
All asphalt.
Contracted through.
Okay. Well, since I've been on the commission, the movement has been, and I agree with this movement, to preserve residential areas, the tenor and, design of them for residential purposes. So your statements made it kind of easy for me tonight, and I appreciate your attitude about it, but it's not consistent where we have been going in the last 5 to 6, 7 years with this. So I'm hoping that you can find someplace else. You've just about said as much. And I saw in here where you wanted to build. If you want to use that land, your land, for that purpose that's compatible, that would be my recommendation to you. And good luck with that. Thank you.
Can I ask this question? On acquiring more land, can you change it at a later date to a zoning it different for agriculture or something like that? Or basically that won't be?
This is something that we work out.
Okay, all right, thank you now.
The answer to this, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on what it is. We don't have enough specifics, but Mr. Richardson would be happy to talk specifically with you about that.
Okay. So
Thank you.
more so is because of the residential and the,
Right.
okay. All right.
Commissioner Bynum?
Mr. Downs, just a quick comment. So I had in my mother's neighborhood, which is purely residential, we had a gentleman who had the same situation. And of course, parking the big truck in the residential area was not appropriate for the area, but he was able to find another location that wasn't that terribly far away, and it's in the Leavenworth Road area. So, I think there's going to be some options for you with another location for your truck that's not too terribly far away. So just kind of to let you know that I think this can be worked out for you.
Yeah,
Not-
that's
Not
no
on your
problem.
property, but in another location.
Only thing we run into with the trucks that size or when they're over 12,000 is it has to be like in an industrial like zone. So
Okay. Well,
if I knew some-
perhaps you can leave your phone number with staff and we can chat about that
Okay.
after.
Okay, some other places. that
Thank you.
They know, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend?
Yes, move to approve the recommendation of the Planning Committee for denial.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Ramirez,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley,
Aye.
Walters, Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the planning and zoning portion of tonight's meeting. We now move to the regular portion of our agenda. Does any member of the commission or the county administrator wish to set aside any item on the regular consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the regular consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Move to approve all items as submitted?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to the public hearing agenda. Item number 1, Premier Investments LLC, IRBs. This is a public hearing regarding industrial revenue bond for Premier Investments. I turn it over to County Administrator Bach to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. Tonight, we're excited to bring forward a project which really is a long time in the works. It comes from a time when we had identified a parcel of property that was tax delinquent in our community. It was a defunct warehouse building that was no longer being used. We were able to move this property through our land bank and get into the hands of a developer in our community to turn it into something. They upheld the terms of our agreement initially, demoed the property, and are now here to come forward with their project that they're doing to build it new. With that, I will recognize our Director of Economic Development, Catherine Carter, and let her present the project before we request to move to the public hearing. Ms. Carter?
Good evening. Catherine Carter, Director of Economic Development. As Doug Bach just mentioned, so this has been a somewhat of a storied parcel, and I'm going to go into a little bit of the back history of where we've come. Also talk a little bit about the company that is coming in and wants to do some pretty cool things here. So here we go. So Premier Investments, they're a family-owned and managed company. They're here tonight if you have any questions after this presentation. They've been headquartered here, I believe, somewhere over 50 years. There was some unsure exactly how many of those years, but it's been a while. They have over 3 million square feet in of industrial space in Armourdale. Their last building, which you can drive by, you can see kind of how very well it has been kept, and it looks really good from the outside. And as a resident in the area, you can kind of see how even though these are spec buildings that are built, they're sought after for distribution and manufacturing. So here's kind of now one that's up and running, 500 Osage. Then the property in question tonight is 1101 South 5th Street. This is an area you may remember had the Midwest Cold Storage. This is what that looked like just about a year ago before Premier Investments purchased this property and demolished this building that was literally falling down. By having this demolished, we've already seen some benefits. This was an area that there was a lot of calls for service, so already seeing benefits. Here is a rendering of the property that they are proposing on this site. So very similar to what you saw kind of with their other buildings. And so this will be about an 80,000 square foot speculative building, looking at roughly 100 new jobs. This is a $5,500,000 capital investment. As I mentioned, this is a company that has strong roots in the area. They have heavily invested in the adjacent business park. Additionally, there are a number of site challenges to this place. We've got, there was the initial demolition costs, as well as an active rail line, as well as some partners or neighbors around there that are good neighbors, but also not necessarily the best in terms of kind of marketing a site to new companies. as well as the site dimensions and setbacks. It's a very narrow site, and there's some railroad property nearby, which does make it a bit challenging to get a good-sized building on there. So with these items that I've just mentioned, we recommend an 80% abatement for 10 years. Oops, too much. Currently, the taxes are, I mean, it has been in the land bank for quite some time, but currently the taxes are about $16,000 a year. During the abatement period, we're looking at closer to $51,000, and then starting in year 11, we're at $250,000. So we see this as a good plan to get a property that has not been used, has been an issue for many years, back into the paying taxes and good use, as well as we do a cost-benefit analysis for all industrial revenue bond projects, and this had an average of 23% return on investment for all the taxing jurisdictions. So tonight we have a public hearing as well as a resolution of intent to issue the IRBs.
Thank you. Now open the public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this item?
My name is Greg Kendall. I'm president of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council and a resident of Kansas City, Kansas. Mayor, commissioners, county administrator, staff, I'm here in support of this request. As has been noted by Catherine, this site had been in property tax arrears for many years. It was an eyesore. Power had been cut off to the property, and it was a haven for transients. Premier Investments bought the property and immediately invested $750,000 to demolish the building and clean up the site. There are 3 active railroad tracks to cross in order to access the site, which does have a limitation on the number of clients that'll be interested in the location. And because of those setbacks, there is a significant limitation in terms of being able to expand the site. The proposed development invests $5.5 million into the community, creates significant net new property taxes even during the incentive period, and creates additional job opportunities. I do want to point out that Premier Investments isn't just another development company. They are a local family, the Wilhites. Their offices are in the middle of the development. They are engaged in the community. They retain ownership of these buildings, and they are approachable by their clients. We make about 150 retention calls annually with a number of them in that park there in Armourdale, and consistently their clients speak well of them, the facilities, and the quality of the interactions they have with the Wilhites. That means a lot to us when it comes to retaining good companies. That long-term ownership of quality buildings is meaningful and weighs heavily on our support for this request, slightly beyond the normal policy. It's for these reasons that we encourage you to support this request as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Anyone else present who would like to speak in support? Seeing none, anyone present who would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the Wilhites for their continued investment in Kansas City, Kansas, and Armourdale. Your presence is a real positive for us as you bring lots of jobs into our community and you bring lots of tax revenue into our community, and we appreciate both of those things. As Catherine said, the day that you demolished this building, you improved that site, because when you used to look up blight in Wikipedia, that building, the old cold storage building, is probably the picture that popped up, because it absolutely put a negative strain on everything around it. So thank you for that. I hope everybody appreciates that building a building on spec means you don't have anybody who is yet committed to move in there, but you're going to build the building anyway because your track record is so good that you are able to find tenants and fill those buildings, and I thank you for that. Although I know that we very often need to give incentives to get new development, I'm not wild about giving a 100% incentive or abatement, because even the best new development puts strain on the infrastructure around it, and that's why I am thrilled that your development will pay additional tax dollars from day one. You will materially contribute to supporting the infrastructure that supports you, and I really appreciate that. With that, I move to approve as submitted.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Ramirez?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Kane? Markley?
Aye.
Walters? Philbrook?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0, that motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to the administrator's agenda. Item number 1 is the proposed stormwater rate transition, and I would like to recognize Commissioner McKiernan at this time.
Pushed the wrong button. How long have I been doing this? Evidently not long enough. Mr. Mayor, what I would ask at this time is, I think it would actually be appropriate if we did hear a presentation from Public Works on this, and I'm getting to my notes right here. I know that we recently, who are inside, have recently been presented with another possible option. So first of all, let's back up just a little bit. First of all, we all know, and I think we all understand, that the issues related to improving our management of stormwater runoff directly affect the quality of life for many, if not all of us. I think we further understand that the cost of improving and our management of that stormwater is not going to be trivial, and that we all are going to have some measure of responsibility for helping achieve shared improvement. The last time that Public Works was ahead of us, they presented us with 3 options. That was a flat fee option, and option number 1, which was based, your new fee was based entirely on a multiplier on the square footage of impervious area that were calculated for your parcel, and then an option 2, which still used square footage as the baseline calculation, but broke all the properties into 13 tiers or 13 groups. Since that time, because several of us had expressed some concerns with both of those options, that while option 1 may be the more equitable, that for many people option 2 is the more affordable, not for all because of that inequity, but for many. And so Public Works has come up with another alternative for us to consider. I personally still think that option 1 is the most equitable, but I think that this new alternative that they have come up with, and so far shared only with us internally, is probably the more palatable, because over 94% of the parcels in Wyandotte County will actually experience a very, very small increase in their stormwater fee. And so, having said all that, because we have all just learned about this new option, and because despite our best efforts to communicate out, many people are just becoming aware of the need for us to improve our stormwater system, and because I still have a lot of questions about the implementation of this, and I'm getting questions that I can't answer, and I don't like to vote on something where there are questions that I still can't answer. What I would suggest, Mayor, is that what I would move is that Public Works make a presentation presenting the new payment option to all of us tonight, but that we as a commission table a decision on this item until our meeting of February 27th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I want to ask, is Public Works able to present? Okay, thank you. All right. Yes, yes. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call, Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
The vote is 10-0, that motion carries to hold it
We'll
over.
now hear the presentation on the new proposal. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. We'll get right into the presentation. I'd first start reminding ourselves that the primary objective of this stormwater utility is to protect life and property. It is also a mission, an objective to reduce and manage impacts to the public stormwater system and the environment. As the pictures scroll across the screen, I'll mention a few things. It's been our approach to this the last few years to do everything we can to maximize the resources we currently have, to get better at the work we need to do with what we have. And we've discussed that in past discussions regarding street preservation. That's been my philosophy. In 3.5 years here now, we are going to approach a ceiling where the department can not do much more than it is at that point. As we mentioned the last meeting, there are over 2,000 work orders right now that are open, and that list is growing. There's $141 million in needs in just 8 basins of the 46 total we have, and only $19 million of that capital is in this proposal. It's getting more expensive. It is impacting folks more and more. It is impacting the quality of life in KCK. Staff has presented a transition to a balanced and sustainable rate structure. And we've reviewed this graph together a few times. And so I won't spend a lot of time, and I just wanted to quickly highlight that a really important component of that is the increased levels and commitment to maintenance. And so this allows staff to address the emergencies we currently have and will have for a while, but to be more proactive so that eventually those emergencies are minimized.
As Jeff mentioned, the unified government has more than $141 million. Is better? Yeah. Has more than $141 million in stormwater needs, and to begin addressing those needs, staff formed an action plan. But plans cannot exist in a vacuum.
Where's the feedback coming from?
It is off. It is turned off. Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Well, it's been a good start. Okay. So plans cannot exist in a vacuum. Community feedback matters, and over the past year, staff worked hard to ensure they not only obtained it, but they created an environment where interested individuals could engage if they chose to do so. Staff accomplished this by holding multiple open houses, meeting multiple times with the Kansas City, Kansas Chamber of Commerce, running an informational video on UGTV, communicating through digital and print platforms like Facebook, Nextdoor, e-News, and the Citizen newsletter. Now, visualizing the outreach staff performed can be difficult, but this calendar does a good job of capturing the time staff or multiple members of staff spent engaging the community, adjusting the program based on feedback received, reducing the capital funding, reporting to the Board of County Commissioners, and sending mail to every residential address in Kansas City, Kansas. Community feedback has shaped this plan from the very beginning, and it is important to note that each of the options Anna will discuss tonight is consistent with opinions voiced by the community in the 2018 and 2020 citizen surveys. In both of those surveys, 83% of respondents believe it's either very important or important for the unified government to manage stormwater runoff. And in both 2018 and 2020, a majority of respondents also believe that property owners who generate more runoff should pay more per square foot than those who generate less runoff. If approved, the community engagement process will continue. Staff will help customers look up their impervious area by phone, online, or in person. Staff will speak with neighborhoods, groups, and individuals about the transition timeline and why the transition is needed. And staff will assist those groups, businesses, and individuals with unique situations with finding at least the least burdensome solution to implement cost-saving practices.
I'll quickly add that implementation involves a lot of man hours and money. And to do all that before a rate structure is adopted would be like building a road or a facility before a commission approves funding for those things. So that's why we have not started implementation.
So based on the feedback that we've received over the last year, we came up with 2 alternative rate options. And based on the feedback that we've received since January 9th, we've came up with a 3rd option. So all of these options are based on impervious area. They'll all recover the same amount of revenue, and they all reflect a significantly scaled down capital program. So as Jeff mentioned, $141 million in stormwater needs were identified in 8 watersheds that are considered high priority watersheds in the county. However, we originally scaled that down to a plan to address and fund just $58 million worth of projects in those 8 watersheds. Based on public feedback and concern over the impact that this would have on residents, we have continuously and substantially scaled back the number of projects to be funded over the study period. The proposed rates are based on a $19 million capital plan that reflects only 7 of the 12 identified projects. So option 1 rate structure is individually calculated monthly charge based on the rate per 500 square feet shown on the first line of this table. The minimum charge is $4.50 per month, so properties that have no impervious area or no hard surface will pay the minimum fee of $4.50. At the bottom of this table, you can see the percentage of parcels that would pay this minimum charge through 2027. So it starts at about 70% in 2021 and decreases over time as the rate per 500 square feet increases. Option 2 is a tiered rate structure with 13 tiers based on ranges of impervious area. So again, you can see at the bottom of this table the percentage of parcels that are not impacted under this option, which is less than option 1, with 43% in just the first 2 years. So what's important to know about the tiered rate structure is that putting properties into these blocks, it helps to address the magnitude of the bill impact, but it depends on where a parcel's impervious area falls within the tier. So properties that are at the higher end of the tier would pay a lower monthly charge than option 1. Properties at the lower end of the tiers would pay a higher monthly charge than option 1. Option 3 then is an additional tiered option with 3 tiers based on ranges of impervious area. So this third option was created in an attempt to mitigate the impact on the larger parcels even more. So under this option, all parcels would see an increase in the monthly fee starting in 2021 versus option 1 and 2, where a significant percentage of parcels would not see an increase in the first few years. As with option 2, whether or not a property will pay more or less than option 1, again, depends on where the parcel's impervious area falls within the tier. So this table provides some examples of monthly bills for 5 different measurements of impervious area. So we show the monthly bill for option 1, 2, and 3, and then for 3 area communities. Again, when you look at option 2 and option 3, the impact as to whether or not option 2 or option 3 will result in a higher charge or a lower charge than option 1 depends on where the property falls within the tier. I want to point out that properties in Johnson County do have the opportunity to receive funding from Johnson County's stormwater ad valorem tax. None of the other communities in Kansas have a similar stormwater tax. So each of these rate options will include a credit program to give property owners the ability to lower their monthly fee. So some examples would be implementing a rain garden or detention basin, something to address stormwater runoff on their property. So in each of the 3 options, there'll be an ability to achieve credits in the areas of quantity, so reducing the amount of runoff coming off property, quality, which is reducing the pollutants in the runoff, discharge credit, this is for properties whose runoff flows directly to the river, and then the ratio credit for properties that have at least 30 square feet of green space to 1 square foot of impervious area or hard space. So just as an example, the Connector properties, which are largely agriculture, will most likely qualify for the ratio credit as well as the minimum bill in most of these options. Under option 1, the amount of the quantity credit increases based on 4 different levels of service, as you can see there. The quality credit will be determined on a case-by-case basis, just in order to allow flexibility in how this credit can be achieved. Under option 1, the quantity and the quality credits are additive for a max credit of 50%. Under rate options 2 and 3, the credit program is still available. The direct discharge credit and the ratio credits are the same as option 1. However, in option 2, the quantity and quality credits are scaled down in terms of the levels of credit and the max credit. Likewise, for option 3, the quantity and the quality credits are scaled down more.
All three options create a sustainable funding system. All three are based on hard surface. Option 1, again, was the initial recommendation in June of 2019. The 2 subsequent options were a result of the additional public engagement. Each option 2 and 3 were developed as alternates to mitigate the impacts to medium and large customers. Again, there are $141 million in needs in 8 basins. We only have 19 in this proposal. Consequences of taking no action are continued deferred maintenance, increasing costs, increasing number of emergencies, a decline in level of service, and more safety concerns. Again, the primary purpose of the stormwater utility is to protect life and property. It is also to reduce and manage impacts to the stormwater system and the environment. It is not to burden folks with fees. This is not just an Argentine problem, it's not just an Armourdale problem, it's not just a Turner problem, it's a community problem. We'll be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you. Could you just briefly describe some of the safety concerns when we have, let's say, a failure in the public infrastructure? How does that affect the safety of the community?
Well, it would point to things like street flooding and danger to motorists, the various basins, creeks. Hate to overstate things, but there's all kinds of safety risks to kids in those situations. We have, especially with the.
I think your microphone's off.
I know, it's on, it's just.
Okay.
I'll just try to speak up. With the sort of extreme weather we've been having for a number of years now, the flash floods, just creates risk to folks and motorists, is all we're trying to say.
And so, and also the pictures that you showed at the beginning, and they were just the snapshots we couldn't even zero in on except on 4 of them. Are those from all parts of the community? You say it's not just an Argentine problem, not just Armourdale, Turner, but they cross the entire city?
That's correct.
Okay, and then of the 8 watersheds, the 8 basins, how many total watersheds are there or basins are there in the city?
46.
46?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're only addressing 8?
I'm sorry, 50.
50, okay. And this proposal only addresses 8?
Yes.
Correct? And those were selected because they have the most number or the most serious problems, obviously?
That's that combination of the two.
Okay. Have we have any projections that as we delay these projects, how much it increases our cost in the future? Any sense of the order of magnitude we're talking about?
I don't know that we have a good answer for that, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of additional comments. First of all, I can completely appreciate the staff are not happy with me, not happy with us, for not just making a decision already. But I really do think that we're doing exactly what we are here to do. We are here listening to our constituents, we're listening to our public, and we're doing our best to gather information and make decisions that in the end result are fair and equitable and have the biggest benefit for the largest number of people. That's our job. And so although I wish we could make a decision tonight, because this was just presented to the public for the first time tonight, and because I'm just seeing the details of the credit program for the first time tonight, I think it actually is in all of our best interests to delay this decision and to continue to engage with our public. I do believe that, Mr. Reno, when you say that our efforts to communicate about this were far outclassed anything we've ever done from our perspective as the UG, I absolutely believe we put more effort into it. But I don't know about other commissioners, but at least in my experience, for whatever reason, many people are just now paying attention. They're just now thinking about this which is generating a lot of feedback to us that I think we need to thoughtfully consider before we finally make a decision on this. And so I have appreciated all your work. I continue to appreciate it. I know that we will ultimately make a decision and that we will move forward. But I want to believe that we have listened as thoroughly as we could and considered as many different conditions as we can and as many different people as we can before we make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. If I have a issue, who would I talk to appeal my case?
We haven't decided what staff member will be that person.
Okay? And the issue there is, like I
You're
said,
talking about, I'm sorry, but after we start implementation and the start date of January next year.
and then when you have an issue, and I sit on the Human Rights Commission for the governor, and when somebody has an issue, it comes to a different group, not somebody that's in charge of it. It's somebody outside the group that thinks outside the box, that knows every single angle of this, even more detailed than what we know. So somebody can say, hey, and then whoever it is, 3 or 4 people, and say, hey, let's do this. Because if it's somebody from Public Works or the administrator or somebody else, it's going to be a one-sided conversation. And in my mind, we owe our constituents and our business folks an answer that is the answer and not skewed one way or the other. And in my mind, I think that's critical before we'd make any kind of movement before, that it shouldn't be, maybe you participate, but there's some people outside the box that we appoint that said, here's your guidelines that you have to go by. Instead of saying it's 3 of the people from Public Works and maybe her, and then you guys, and I know you want to do it. There's no doubt about it. But that's not fair to me. If I'm going to come up and I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to say, well, at the end of the day, that's the answer. I don't think that's fair to us. And something else, we should be able to go to our internet, our website, and pull up our property, and it should be able to tell me before we vote how much my taxes are going to be. There should be something on the internet that says, Mike Kane, you're going to pay this. Because I don't want somebody to get a bill in the mail that says, oh my. My mother and father-in-law don't look at the Citizen. They don't have a computer. They don't know what's going on. And this week, I've had more calls from outside my district from people saying, what in the hell is going on at City Hall? And as Commissioner McKiernan says, I can't answer your question. And these are the things that people are asking us. And if I'm a big business owner, I'm going to want to talk to somebody that's going to want to listen. I'm going to want to talk to somebody that says, hey, the Conetter Farms, how much am I going to have to pay before I start paying it? I don't want them to get it in the mail and say, hey, here we are, here's your, and then what's going to happen, staff, they're not going to call you guys, they're going to call us. These are things we need to think about. The Donnelly College, community college, all the high schools, the grade schools, the churches. Every single group should know what they're going to have to do before we vote on it, because I don't think it's fair if they don't know, and it's not fair to me when I say, hey, you're going to pay this much money, and then why am I paying this much money? And I know, staff, you're working your tails off. There is no doubt about it. But I don't think our work's done yet.
Commissioner Johnson.
Of us as commissioners, and I know that's no easy task. I have waffled on this, and you know this, on this issue. But and I think that it's fair to say that you guys have put a lot of energy into the engagement of the community, but yet we still get, letters, emails that say, I'm not fully vetted on this particular issue. I think that at some point we do have to make a decision, but I think we could do the best of our ability as a unified government, not just public works, but from the mayor to the commission all the way down, to make sure we have put our best foot forward to make sure that this community has been adequately advised as to what's coming down the pike. We make the decision whether we do it 15 days from now, 30 days from now. It doesn't go in effect until 2021. And then all of a sudden everybody's going to have, and maybe we tell them in advance, hey, it's coming, but everybody's going to see the results of this decision in 12 months. And so we have to make sure that we measure, and I said this 18 months ago, I said we need to measure measure once or twice and before we make this decision, and I'm saying we still need to measure a little bit longer. I'm not comfortable as of yet to make a decision on any of these three options, and I've gone through all three of them, and I can see the merits in all of them, and it's going to require some real thought, particularly as a church owner, or a church, not owner, but a church leader. What I am concerned about, and this question actually is for legal, is are there considerations that we need to be mindful of as a commission on all three of the options as they are presented right now? Are there things that we need to be mindful of from your perspective, Kenny?
Well, whenever the commission makes a decision, one thing you're supposed to do is that treats different classes of people differently, that you articulate and have a rational basis for why you're making that distinction between classes. So, and that of course plays into most importantly in the different tiers and how the different tiers are weighed. But as long as you can articulate a rational basis for why you're distinguishing between different classes, then the courts will usually give you the discretion and uphold your decision.
Okay. And I'm assuming we're all going to be versed on that by the time we make that decision then, that we'll be able to explain and be able to give the rationale on that. I think we're getting closer, Jeff. So Doug, Jeff, whoever else is out there, be patient with us. Our citizens, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think our citizens are appreciating us measuring our decision. And so please give us a little bit more time and space. I'm asking those that are watching and pray for us that we'll make a right decision on behalf of all the constituents in Wyandotte County. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Philbrook.
Thank you for all those who spoke before me. So this is going to make it much easier for me. Number one, I heard a lot about this right off the get-go because I'm a business owner and I have impervious surface. Yes, I do. It doesn't look like it, but I do. And I get to talk with a lot of business folks, and I really appreciate them bringing me into the fold and explaining to me their problems with this, because they're part of the backbone of this community, just like our residents are. And so I appreciate them bringing me into this. Also hearing from the not-for-profits, the churches and those sort of folks that aren't making money particularly, and a lot of times they are pretty much right on the edge of existence. And so, yes, we have to definitely take them into account as well. I do have a concern also around the Storm and Surface Water Utility Appeals Board. I really don't like the consistency of that board for the same reasons that other folks have said. And I think that needs to be a little more balanced. That board needs to be a little more balanced, because we're asking the same people who administer everything and have helped us decide to do this to also fight back on their own people, that made these decisions, and therefore. So I'm not sure that's really fair, on either side to do it that way. I'm also not ready, to push this forward yet. And there's no way I can express how thankful I am to the Public Works Department and for everybody that's been working their fannies off on this, because I know it has to be very, very frustrating for them, putting up with us and the public, because they have worked very hard. They were given marching orders to figure out how they were going to help us, the city, help us take care of ourselves with all of this water. So you guys, you've done a wonderful job. I just hate to push back on you, but I'm kind of in the same boat with some of the other commissioners, and that is we're still listening and we're still trying to balance a little bit more out. But I know we're a heck of a lot closer now than we were when we started. Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I appreciate, as a number of the commissioners who've already spoken, the efforts of Public Works. But the adage is, act in haste, repent in leisure. And as just as recently as this week, Mr. Fisher was attended at my request a meeting of a group of churches. And it was amazing that after all the outreach, there were still so many in that group, and they have constituencies as well who were unaware and didn't understand. And I was not comfortable after I saw that. I think it's fair notice that we get a little bit more time to understand what was presented to us just in the last 10 days or 2 weeks, and that the public get a chance to really appreciate what that means. So delay is not denial, as they say in church. And the other thing that struck me is we have people who will be hit in one way or another several times. And by that I mean it will affect individuals, it will affect those who go to churches, those who go to schools, and to businesses. So I think the time that we're asking for is a benefit for the decision that we will come to make very shortly. And it will benefit, I think, our constituents at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Walters?
Thank you. Jeff, appreciate the work you've done. I think option 3 gives us another option that is attractive in a lot of ways. I did see the details of it here earlier in your presentation. And one of the things I'd just like to pass on to you as my personal bias, I hope we don't end up with a system that has to have a lot of appeals. I hope it's a simple system, straightforward, uniformly applied, easy to understand, and that all of our constituents don't have to become experts and tie your department up and create a bureaucracy of appeals on something that could be pretty straightforward. I hope we're working in that direction, and the closer we can get to that, I think the better. So I just throw that out as my personal request. And again, thanks for all the effort you and your group have put in on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Walters, thanks for that comment about the appeals process, the additional workload that I believe staff would be involved with had we not had an opportunity to read through the ordinance and raise some questions. I think there's been a number of questions raised, which justifies us postponing our vote tonight one way or another on what we do with this. We don't have the luxury of doing nothing. That's the issue before us as a body. We don't have that luxury of doing nothing. And this is an issue that's been around in this community for a couple of decades, and it's before us today, and we will have to make those decisions. I would ask that the maker of the motion to bring this forward in the February meeting. I don't know that February meeting would be time enough for all of us to have every question that we have to bring forward and or options to have input into some of the criteria set forth in the ordinance. We've heard an option in reference to the appeals process. I think it's a matter of having a member of the public
have a say within that. We do the same thing on the state level with the KCC to ensure that the public is represented at the table. I think there's other issues that come forward dealing with stormwater that these pictures demonstrate. Also, Public Works not having the money to take care of just our roads and curbs and other issues. My concern is, are we raising enough money to address our concern? It's one thing to start down this and get the public paying for 5 years up front for a $19 million project when it's been stated we have a larger number than that is needed. And what I don't want to see us having to make a vote every couple of years to do this. And I think it's the prudent thing to do is get those numbers solidified, educate our community. This third tier is a more palatable tier. It's the beginning of, I think, a tremendous opportunity for us to look at how much money we can generate. If it means we all have to bump up a little bit more to meet the criteria of meeting more, then that's something we need to discuss. I just don't want to see putting a burden on our community and not meeting our needs, because then we're going to have to come back, and it's about building public trust. And I want the public to be able to trust the decision that comes forth by this body. And so, Mayor, I would ask that we give consideration to postponing this vote even off until the March meeting. That gives us 60 days to address some concerns that the committee has.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Jeff, and Public Works staff. I've only been here for 2 weeks, but you guys have done your due diligence to get me up to date and all the information that I need. If I were to arrange, like for my district, a neighborhood meeting with all the neighborhood groups and the two NBRs, would you guys be willing to come and present to them and have a conversation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You know, when you look at this, you know, this has been years in the making. You know, it's something that is, as it's been delayed, as we have not attended to these infrastructure projects that have to be dealt with, we have simply added to the load, and it makes the decision for us even heavier. For this commission assembled here, it has made this decision for us even more weighty. And so we're playing catch up, whereas if we'd gotten out in front of this 15 years ago, we would not be making the same kind of decision. You know, I will say that part of the difficulty here is this is a very complicated matter. Just presenting these options, it's a very complicated formula. Most people tuning in here are not going to be able to follow the data, follow the logic, and really understand how this impacts them. It's a very complicated matter. I think that we have to, I don't know how you simplify this for people, except that we have to find a way, again, to engage the community. If there was one thing that came out of the public hearing on January 9th, is that we know the communications are difficult. There is not a print newspaper that everybody is receiving and going and reading reports from the unified government. It doesn't happen. The news media does not show up here to follow that hearing, and people are not going to spend the time to do that. And so communication is a two-way street. If given the circumstances, the fact that people are not able to engage us in ways that they used to be able to engage, we have to fill in that gap. We have to find the way to engage folks to bring them along. And a lot of that falls upon us as electeds. Now, I have to say that when I sat on the Public Works Standing Committee several years ago, when this was first presented that we were going to move to look at the impervious surface fee, that was 3 years ago. And there have been conversations all along, I know, with the commission and the mayor about this is what's coming. And so this is the kind of conversation when we go out into public, we have to make people aware of, hey, this is coming out, folks. And just planting a seed and let other people take that seed to their friends, to their neighbors, to their family, somehow that didn't happen. I think after the last meeting, I was concerned because I feel as if, as a commission, we have not agreed upon some of the principles here or some of the fundamentals of this. We all understand this has to be done, but I think there's some question. Well, is the impervious surface rate really the most equitable way? Do we have to find some way to flatten the steep incline for the larger, people with larger impervious surface? Do we need to include that in? I don't think we were in agreement upon that. I don't think we were in agreement that the communication process was everything we needed it to be. So the problem is that as a commission, I kind of feel like we're scattered. This would be not a good time to move this forward, but we have to move this forward at some point and fairly soon because we've already made commitments to some improvements. The Argentine pump station and of course the Turkey Creek wing wall. We had to do those things because if we didn't, even more failures would happen. So this has been delayed for years. It just increases the runoff, literally, upon the commission of the problems that have accumulated over the years. Now we're having to take on a very serious problem that did not have to be this serious if it had been dealt with before. And it needs to be a lesson to us that we have to look at all of our infrastructure and get out in front of those. And we're going to have to make decisions about what this community is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And we've got to communicate that vision, and we've got to get buy-in, and we've got to let people understand if we don't make those right kinds of decisions now, we're not going to be where we need to get to. But I think we should take this as an opportunity to look at our communication strategy, to look at what the responsibility of staff, electeds, and the public is, what are the responsibilities of these in these matters, and all of us exercise our responsibilities so that we can identify the vision for this community moving forward and come to common agreement about the strategy to get there. And that's a tremendous amount of engagement, but that really falls upon us as elected and staff to continue to bring these things and really state the message in very simple, clear terms so that we can move forward. So I appreciate Commissioner McKiernan for bringing this, and I think we've heard from the commission, this needs more time. It shouldn't surprise us. We've waited 10 years. The runoff has gotten to where it is now. Let's give it a little bit more time, and still, we're going to have to move forward. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two more things. First of all, regarding communication, I talked just this afternoon with a gentleman who was quite wound up, and I said, you know, we put this out in the Citizen. And he said to me, I saw it, but, you know, I didn't really understand how it impacted me when I read the Citizen article. I didn't get it. Until I talked to you right now, I didn't get it. And so I think that's some of our collective challenge is to help people get it, not just to put the information out, but to bring understanding on the backside of that information. And that's what a lot of us are charged with working with you to do out in the community. With respect to my colleague's suggestion that we postpone this even further, I would respectively suggest that we maintain the February 27th date, and if on that date we decide that we are not able to make a decision, then we can at that time move it further back, but that we maintain a goal for ourselves of February 27th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Oh, we did. We already voted on it, sorry. Well, having said that, I believe we are adjourned. Nope. We don't.
Land bank. Land bank.
Yes, we're adjourned. The regular session. All right, we now are called back to order as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Does any member of the commission or county administrator wish to set aside any item on the Land Bank consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Barkley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
And now we have a public announcement.
On the lighter side of things, and some of you probably saw it in the postings that went out to employees, we're doing a tailgate for the employees out on the plaza tomorrow from noon to 1:30. If you all can join us, that'd be great. Wear your red. We're trying to show our support for the Chiefs going to the Super Bowl. We're going to fly a drone up over and take a picture and put it out and show it. So if you can all come out and be on the plaza, it'd be great. And root for a Chiefs victory.
Hallelujah. We are adjourned.